Okay, we're going to start off where we left off essentially in the last tutorial. We finished substructure in terms of takeoff, and we used some of those dimensions, or most of those dimensions that we calculated in the substructure to populate a bill of quantities substructure element. We're going to move back into the takeoff side of things, and we're going to look at, I suppose, the things you've been going through with FICRA, starting with external walls, moving on to internal walls, and then maybe into frames and finishes. So you can continue working on the building you've been working on yourself, or you can import in the staged Costex files that are provided for you on Brightspace. I'm going to open up Costex and bring back in, I suppose, the last tutorial, the finished tutorial as such, from, I suppose, task 5. So to do so, you'll notice that this interface is a little bit different. It's got a blue color instead of a red color from the previous videos. That's because this is the new version of Costex, version 6.9, whereas I think I was doing the last tutorials on version 6.6. But everything that's in version 6.6 is in 6.9. It just looks slightly different. It's got a little bit of a different interface, but pretty much the same. So click File and either open the file that you've been working on or import in Costex data rather than Costex data as a copy. So I'm going to import in this Warehouse 05 workbook. So you should have been able to save those files from Brightspace on your local drive. And then when you open up Costex, you'll click Warehouse 05 workbooks, or as I said, you'll open up what you've been working on if you want to use the file that you've been working to date. So that doesn't necessarily come in as the same name, but it is what it is. It is Warehouse 05. It's coming in as a copy. That's okay. Select, and that's fine. And it will ask me where I want to save the drawings associated with this file. I can put it anywhere on my own machine. Let's put it on downloads, but you can put it in a dedicated file that you may have set up for this particular project or this particular module. So that's that, I suppose, that building imported into Costex. And if I open it, it'll pretty much start me off where I left off the last time around. So just give it a second as it loads up those drawings and dimension groups, and let's take a quick look. So where are we? Click Dimension View. We've got our 4 or 5 drawings that we've been working on. We've got element 19 substructure, and we went through all those dimensions in the last tutorial, and we had some standard dimensions in there, or one standard dimension, that was the gross floor area. So clicking on maybe your ground first floor plans just to see, I'm going to start with external walls. So what have I got here in terms of external walls? But if you can remember from your takeoff at FICRA, you've got a brick facade, or let's say outer leaf, in terms of the external walls on 2 sides of the elevations of this particular building. So if there's 4 elevations, obviously, we've got 2 sides that have brick facade. Now that's just the outer leaf. We've got a cavity with some cavity insulation in there, and we've got 100mm blockwork internal leaf. Now this was a building that was designed a number of years ago. I think from the regulations point of view, if it was per current regulations, that cavity would have to increase and that insulation would have to increase in terms of its thickness. There's a slight change over this kind of side of the building where the reception and corridor is and stairs is. So this right hand corner, we've got a 215 internal block wall. And then we've got some 215 internal walls and 100mm blockwork internal walls. At the first floor, everything's pretty much the same from an external wall perspective, just that what was the 215 internal leaf is replaced by a 100 block internal leaf on the first floor. Now when I'm measuring blockwork, be it external walls or internal walls, I like, well, it's up to you to actually figure out what way you want to measure it. But from my own experience, it's best to divide your takeoff into floors. So if you're doing external walls, you could measure them from, I suppose, the ground floor construction, that DPC level, all the way up to the parapet. If you're happy enough with that, that's fine. But it is probably good practice to break them up into floors. So measure all your inter or external walls on the first floor or ground floor, and then move on to the first floor, designating the height in each. You'll see what I mean in a second. So we're just going to set up a folder. Let's click Dimensions, add dimension group. Okay, so this is the add dimension group properties. Let's name the first item 100 millimeters block work. And let's say external and ground floor. Okay. For the moment in the folder, we're going to put it in element 21, external walls. This is a new one, so I have to type it first, and I'm going to backslash or forward slash, whatever that one is on the left hand side beside your shift button, and I'm going to put it in a subgroup called ground floor, so I know what's ground and what's first. So again, this is just good practice. It might be a little bit different than how you measured it with Vicra, but that's okay. See it a few different ways. Make up your own mind how you want to measure it. Now, some of you may were making mistakes leaving that as an area in your class test that we did around Christmas time, but obviously this is going to be measured as a length. All your walls generally are measured as lengths. You might be asking, well, I'm measuring them as wall areas. Well, we're going to display it as a wall area, measuring it as length, and give it a default height. We'll come back to the default height in a second. So for the moment, let's just add our dimension group with measurement type length and the default display length. We will come back to it, and the color being lime green is fine. So click insert, and there goes a group, external walls, ground floor. Actually, that's a mistake. Let's change that. Ground first. Ground, double click back on it. Ground floor. Okay, let's get it right. Click update. So we've got our 100 millimeter blockwork external walls in the ground floor. Let's add another dimension group. This folder should default to what I typed in on the last dimension, and that's fine. And let's put in another one, 100 millimeter. And we've got brickwork, external ground floor. Similar again, leave it in the same folder, length, and let's give it a different color this time. We don't have to, but let's give it navy. Okay. Don't worry about the negative dimensions. We're not going to use them for the moment. And there we have another dimension in there. And then our last dimension from a ground floor construction perspective is the 215 blockwork inner leaf on the ground floor. So let's just add that. So 215 millimeters. Let's kind of keep the same, I suppose, terminology here. Blockwork, external, and also say ground floor. Okay. Area, that needs to change the length. Keep the default display as a length. And let's put another color in here. Purple. Okay. Insert. Now you don't have to use the same colors as I have. And that's my 3 dimensions. What we need to decide now is what's the height of our dimensions. So click on either elevations or sections. In fact, you won't get it from the elevations, it'll have to be from the sections. And this is a section through the ground floor, through the first floor. It gives us an idea that we've got kind of an apex roof here, slight slope down to the eaves with a parapet gutter. There's the height, I suppose, of my ground floor up to first floor level. And then from first floor level, I would measure all the way up to the underside of the parapet. Or you could measure up to where the roof starts and then measure the parapet separately. But let's divide it this way. Let's figure out first what the height is from my ground floor. Now remember, we've measured our rising walls with the substructure because everything below DPC level, which is right here, our ground floor level, ground floor finish level, is part of the substructure. So those rising walls would have been measured before. So I have got as part of the ground floor from that DPC level, ground floor level, up to first floor level. So what's that dimension? Well, I can see that I have it there. It's 2.7. If you wanted to do a quick check, drawings, little measurement rule, and we're going to click the top, right down, and it is 2.7. So I'm happy enough with that. My ground floor to first floor level, story to story level is 2.7. So I'm going to click back on my dimensions. I'm going to drop down a wall area. I could have done this setting it up, but I hadn't my dimensions at that stage, or I hadn't my height dimension at that stage. So click update. It'll assign that dimension, 2.7 height dimension, to all my measurements. Now 2.7 might necessarily be for every single line of my takeoff for that particular blockwork wall, and I can change that, and I'll show you how to do that in a few minutes for our first floor, because the first floor internal walls in fact are different heights. So I'm just going to change 2.7 there and change that length to a wall area. Now if I left it as length, it would be fine too. We'll just have the wall area as a secondary quantity, but it's going to display it here as wall area, and that's essentially what I'm really looking for. So why not put it in? So 2.7 will update. Yes, I want to make sure all those dimensions are going to be defaulted to 2.7, and click the last dimension, also put in 2.7. Okay, so that's essentially our, oh, I didn't change the default display to wall area on that particular dimension, so let's click update. Okay, so there's our three, I suppose, different types of external walls. Now remember, I think some of you were getting confused with the little project I'd given you at Christmas. Your external wall construction does include everything from the outer leaf through to the inner leaf. So even though that's an inner leaf, it's still an external wall. It's still part of the makeup of the external walls. And we're measuring all these items separately. It could be a cost plan where we're basically measuring the internal or center line of that cavity wall, and the description of the wall would include all those 4 or 5 different items. The forming cavities, the insulation, the outside leaf and the inside leaf. But in this case, because it's a bill of quantities measured per the ARN4, we're measuring every item in those external walls separately. So let's start with the 100 brickwork. Let's click on our ground floor plan. Let's click dimensions across the top here. Either select line mode or point mode. Now, heads up, point mode is probably the easiest thing to use here. You might get a little bit confused clicking on the line mode, but again, it's whatever you get comfortable with. I like using point when I'm measuring walls. Line I tend to use when I'm measuring areas, but most of my takeoff is done in point. Geometry on, so it clicks to a point. If you click geometry off, you won't be able to click on a particular point. You'll still be able to measure it, but you'll notice that once my geometry on there, it is clicking or wants to stick to a particular point on the drawings. I could click angle, and that would default it to kind of increments of 15 degrees, which maybe make it a little bit easier to measure straight lines, but I'm going to leave it off for the moment. And I'm going to start with my 100 block wall. So start with the outer leaf. Now again, you'll get used to this, but you're just going to measure one side of the walls. Don't measure 2 sides of the walls, because if you measure 2 sides of the walls, you're registering the length or area of that wall twice. So I'm going to bring this down to, let's say, there. Okay. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to measure from this side. I'm not going to start here or here, because then I'm double measuring that corner. So I'll go from outside to inside, and that's good kind of practice. So the more you kind of get used to this from a quantities of AM point of view, the better. So I'm still on my outside, and see there, that's where my block wall stops on my outer leaf and my brickwork begins. How do I know that? Well, this is a double hatch line, and this is a single hatch line. Okay, so moving on, I'm going to click right here. This particular inside face, our internal leaf, and zoom in a little bit, get the right point, and that'll cover that up to the 215, because that's not a 100 block wall. And measuring the corners, I'm going to kind of go from outside to inside, so that kind of covers me there. I didn't measure this wall, so maybe starting on the inside here rather than the outside. This is the internal leaf, and there we go. And then going from the outside here up all the way to right there, and from here to here, because this is where the 215 begins, and then make sure I've got my corners measured here, right there to there, and then because I don't want to double measure this corner, I'm going to click from there to there. Okay, so that should cover me. Just kind of checking again, have I missed anything? I missed this little corner here. So this is kind of 100mm block work that goes around, click again, that goes around the stanchions here on the ground floor. Okay, so I'm happy enough with that. 203 meters squared. Hopefully that's thereabouts, and I'm going to move on to my brickwork. Now, if I click my brickwork dimension, I could measure away there, but I don't see what I measured before in terms of my ground floor area. So what I can do is, well, I can either click the external walls group or the ground floor folder, and I will see what I've measured in terms of what's in that ground floor, and all I've measured so far is the 100mm block work. But what I can do then is use this filter. So I'm going to drop down, because I'm in ground floor, it should show me all three of those items, and it does, but I'm going to click on brickwork. So even though I'm still on this group, I'm measuring the brickwork, but it's still showing me everything there that I measure in terms of block work. It just gives me an opportunity to kind of start off and see exactly what I measured in terms of the other items. So that's the first part of the brickwork in this facade, all the way across. Now you'll notice I'm measuring through these opes. I will deduct for windows and doors down the line, but for the moment I'm measuring through the opes, and that's generally what I do when I'm doing takeoff. And then I'm going to go on the inside face, and I believe all the way down. Oh yeah, there we go. Lovely. And this little return. So is that all my brickwork? I believe it is. I do notice a little bit of block work there I missed. I'll go back to that. That's my brickwork on my two facades. So I'm going to click my next item, and that is the block work. It should be a different color. So here's my blockwork wall, starting right there, because that's where that's left off. Pull it all the way across, stop there, there to there, and from there to there. And then I have another little bit of block work probably to come up from here. Let's start right in there. So from that point all the way up to where I measured there. So I think I've pretty much got everything taken off there. Is there anything I've missed? And I can see that that little bit of 100mm block I haven't measured. And everything in from the external walls perspective on the ground floor, I'm kind of scrolling around just to see, I have covered. So that was the 100mm block. So drop down, click the item. You may have to go back and measure a little bit, something that you missed. And from there to there, and then this little bit from there to there. So you can see how I suppose from a takeoff perspective, how things are joining up. And I'm not double measuring corners. I'm not over measuring items. I could click drawings here, click the little 3D on the right hand side, and just see how that's shaping up. So did I get everything? It kind of did, or at least I think I did. And I can see the heights there, and I can see my cover in terms of my stanchions, and everything is colored up. So I'm happy enough with that, or at least I hope I'm happy enough with that. I can go back and check it at any other one stage, but for the moment that's okay. So let's do the next thing, and that is measuring my first floor external walls. Again, as I said, this is slightly different because we don't have the 2 and 5 inner leaf in this corner. Should be a little bit easier. So just to get used to it, I could copy some of those dimensions over and give them a first floor category, and then change the default height and manipulate the 3 dimensions that I measured previously. But why not get a bit of practice and do this again from scratch, creating a new dimension group. Once I create the new dimension group, it'll default to what I had already measured there in terms of the folder, the last item. So I'm going to change that. 22 internal walls, and change now. Oh, it's not internal walls, is it? 21 external walls. What am I doing? 21 external walls. And then what I meant to change was that subgroup, first floor. Okay, so what am I got going? I've got, again, the same 100mm block work. And this time, external first floor. It's okay. Leave it as length. We'll come back to the default height in a minute. Click insert, and then another dimension, dimension group. That's okay. That was my last one. This time it's 100mm brickwork. External first floor. Okay, happy enough with that. Also change the length. We will be changing that to a default display I want to give it a different color, dark purple, that's okay, and click insert. So there's our 2 dimensions. We don't have the 2 and 5 block work on this particular floor, and you kind of see the reason why I actually do change it up from floor to floor, because it would be a little bit confusing starting and stopping are different heights if I'd measured all the way up to the parapets in terms of what's ground floor and what's first floor. Okay, so let's take a look again at our section. Let's take a look at height. So what we got here, I've measured up to my first floor level with the ground floor, so I need to start off there and finish at the underside of the parapet. So what's the height of that? Is there anything in the dimensions that can tell me that? No, there isn't. I could extrapolate it by basically taking 2.7 from 7.3. You can do that if you want, or just do a quick little measure distance. Start here at the first floor all the way up to the underside of that, right, including mortar. 4.5. It's probably 4. It says 4.51 there, but I imagine it's 4.5. So let's go with that, or 4.51. No, let's go with the 4.51. So click my first floor block work again, and change that to wall area and give it a default height of 4.51. Once that changed, click yes, and then the next one, click height 4.51 and drop down wall area default display. Click yes. So that's our 2 items, and let's quickly measure this. So back to ground floor, first floor plans. Make sure you're in the right plan. Don't measure it from the foundations. Drawing, starting with the block work. This should be fairly straightforward. This time I might go, well, keep it the same. Outside wall, that was brick there, so I'm keeping it to block. Then go on the inside to there. That's where the brick outer leaf starts. I'm not going to worry about that. Starting with the inner leaf here, all the way up to, well, right there, I believe. And then from here, keep going all the way across to here, and then moving around right down. And then this point, all the way across to here. Don't forget your corners. There to there, there to there. And do I have everything there measured from kind of internal block work, or sorry, external block work, 100mm? I think I do. A couple of more corners here to measure. You know, see when I go up there and try measure from that point, it wants to click on that line. So you're best off click from the point that's not overlapping. And then our last corner items here. Okay, so there you go. I'm happy enough with that. I've just the brick facade to measure. And click that. In fact, what I might do is click first floor, use the filter here, drop down, click the brickwork so that I keep that block work open to see where I need to start off from. On the outside, all the way across to here, and this one I believe will go all the way down. I think I'm on the inside still. There we go, and then back to the outside, and that should cover all those external walls on the first floor. Let's take a look at the little 3D, just to see. It's worth every now and again just go back to this. Did I miss something? I did. So there you go. It's worth taking a look. I missed block work in this corner. You might have picked that up when I was going through it. So I need to click external block work there, and then from there to there, and then from there to there. So that's that covered. 404, 135, and then our other dimensions 205, 81, and 36 on the ground floor. So that is pretty much all our external walls. I clicked my external wall category, click my view 3D, I'd see both my ground floor measurements and my first floor measurements. And I'm happy enough with that. So the next tutorial will start off measuring internal walls. Thanks very much.